Good evening, everyone. This is the May 1st board meeting. This is our workshop. And we will start with calling the meeting to order, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mr. Bellucci, did you want to welcome us here?
Absolutely.
Our principal.
So I want to take a moment to actually thank Dr. Adamowski, Mr. Barbas, members of the board, for giving us the opportunity to actually host this evening. As a matter of fact, my PTA co-president, Ms. Fresh and Ms. Hopkins, baked cookies for Dr. Adamowski specifically. So we want to make sure that whatever he does not eat, he takes home tonight.
No. I'll leave them on.
So Dr. Adamowski did give me a few minutes, and I'm really thankful for that. So I want to give you just a brief, maybe history of Roton Middle School. Just about 50 years ago, Roton Middle School had its first meeting, Board of Ed meeting, Common Council meeting at Roton Middle School. That was the only time ever. So this is actually a historical moment. I want to thank Dr. Adamowski and members of the board for being here. And that meeting actually was because they couldn't decide on a name for Roton Middle School. So as a matter of fact, the building opened up and the Norwalk Hour had a big page on the front page. And it actually says, and I have this in my office, it says, poor school opens up with no name. Roton Middle School. And what happened was, there was a group of parents that wanted Roton to be named after the mayor and common council person, Robert B. Oliver, at that time. And some parents wanted to be named after Roton, after the Roton Feather Farms in Roton. So the school opened up, no name. So the principal, Francis Murphy, the first principal, came up with this amazing idea. And by the way, I happened to teach my first year of teaching under Murphy and Nathan Hale here in Norwalk. Francis Murphy came up with this wonderful idea. He met with the Common Council and a board at Roton Middle School. And he said, we're going to name Roton Middle School and also Robert B. Oliver. So the only school in Norwalk, when you come to Roton, on the left side of the building, the Robert B. Oliver Planetarium, on the right side, Roton Middle School. So from a school without a name, we ended up being the school with two names. And as of today, we still have those two names. Thank you. And we do have a video that I would like to show the board and Dr. Adamowski. As you know, Roton Middle School was a spotlight school, selected from many, one of 18 in the country, to go to the presentation in Boston, ASCD presentation. As a spotlight school, Roton Middle School improved by almost 56 points, and the SBI compared to last year, one of the largest growth in the state for a middle school. And we sent a team to Boston from Ms. James, our assistant principal, Ms. Kelly, one of the house leaders, and also Ms. Robinson, one of the other house leaders, and they did an amazing job in Boston. We prepared the video that really speaks about Roton's programs when it came to redesigning our middle schools. We implemented our programs at Fidelity, very excited about it, and now we are moving next to the next phase, if you will. But we thought showing you this video, which includes staff and students, would be a lot better than having me share with you. So, Ms. Robinson, could we do so? Thank you.
Roton Middle School is very proud of its many wonderful accomplishments based on the many middle school redesigning initiatives. And Roton actually has improved by 55.6 points based on the school performance index. mainly due to the wonderful work that everyone has done.
We have staff that really cares. We really get an opportunity to talk about our students, what's successful. It's always a reflective process, and every teacher I've talked to here is always thinking about their practice and how they want to become the best educator they can be.
I like having more time to collaborate with my fellow teachers. I also have time to meet with the teachers that teach other subjects that teach the same students as I do, and we can figure out the best ways to help our students.
A strong leadership definitely helps. We also have high expectations for students as well as staff. We all strive to keep Roton safe, secure, and an organized school.
People are willing to go above and beyond what they normally would be asked to do, and I think the combination of those things really helps this be a successful place.
Everyone is very specialized in their area, and when we have to make things work, we do. I have the unique opportunity to have the students for all 3 years, and it's really interesting to see them grow academically and emotionally and socially.
We're tackling issues like how to differentiate in a class of 50 kids or more. Really amazing how we could use, the technology to change parts for the kids.
When they first started with the 6th grade redesign, they brought us a lot of really great ideas, and every PD was very hands-on and interesting.
The middle school redesign affected my teaching this year because I went from just teaching one subject, which was 7th grade social studies, to teaching 8th and 6th grade social studies and science. So for me, it actually made me a better teacher, and I could go more in depth with the content, and the kids get more out of it because it's more engaging. So I get to build the relationships with the students.
Our students who participate in our RAM Summer Academy Transition Program are at a distinct advantage over their peers who do not. They get to learn the layout of the building. They get to participate in academic reinforcement classes that, of course, will limit the summer gap that so many transitional students suffer from. They get to meet many of the peers that they will have in classes with them, along with meeting many of the teachers. The best part is on the first day of class in the fall. For them, it's not the first day of school. It's more a continuation of what we started in the summer.
I really like the block scheduling because we have twice as much time in math.
I like how all the teachers are very encouraging and friendly.
What I like about us at Roton Middle School are the teachers and activities. They help me a lot and make me learn stuff every day, even though sometimes I don't want to.
The students here are very kind, and when there's an event, we always come together.
I like that you can always go to your teachers for support, especially when you need work done. I was behind last week because I was procrastinating and waiting till the last second, but my teacher was open and available to help me.
I like how everyone works together, the students and the teachers.
We are allowed to have longer classes, which allows us to do more work. We also have longer recess time, which we get to socialize, and we also get to have a longer lunch.
Teachers are ready every single day to teach their kids something new. I also like that Roton is such a hard-working school. We have the highest NWA scores in the district. That's absolutely mind-blowing. I am so proud to be a Ram.
We are Roton! We are Rams!
We are respectful and responsible.
We are achievers! We are motivated! We are successful! We are Roton!
Thank you. Thank you very much.
No, that says it all, doesn't it? Thank you, Sheen. I want to thank the staff who's here tonight for all you've accomplished in the last several years, and I want to thank the Roton PTA for PTO for hosting us tonight and all the great refreshments, and the support that you give the school that makes it what it is. Thank you.
Okay. And I will say, this is where I got started. How I'm on the Board of Ed was because I was a PTA president here, or co-president. And that was a long time ago. And many battles have been taking place since then. We have one small item of business before we get into the workshop session, which is approval for Teacher Appreciation Week. So this is May 7th through May 11th. That we would vote for this to be a Teacher Appreciation Week. We have more than 900 certified Norwalk Public School teachers that have dedicated their careers to making sure that all of our students succeed. Not only are teachers entrusted with preparing students for the future academically, they are the single most influential factor in a child's overall educational experience. Teachers are role models, motivators, and advisors. Long after our students graduate, Norwalk teachers continue to be an influence in their lives. As students continue to face day-to-day challenges and opportunities, Norwalk teachers impart life lessons on the importance of accountability, encourage students to think critically, and drive them to excel in a variety of situations. Additionally, teachers encourage students to be creative and develop skills and a love for learning that extends a lifetime. By recognizing Teacher Appreciation Week, the Norwalk Board of Education joins with students, families, and members of the community in recognizing our talented, dedicated, determined, and inspirational teachers. We are very grateful for the work they do. We encourage everyone to take a moment and thank a teacher today. So I'd love to have a motion to approve Teacher Appreciation Week. Barbara, second. Ms. Keys, all in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. And thank you, teachers. In addition, we would like to recognize May 9th as School Nurse Appreciation Day in Norwalk. The job of Norwalk school nurses goes well beyond cuts and scrapes on a playground. For a school nurse, each day brings a new set of challenges, whether screening for health issues, dealing with injuries, responding to allergic reactions, administering medication, managing chronic diseases such as diabetes and asthma, or addressing the impact of behavioral health and social issues. In addition to working with students, school nurses interact with each other, with other professionals, including teachers, administrators, doctors, counselors, coaches, parents, social workers, and others to improve the safety, health, and academic achievement of all students in the school community. It is due to these interventions and actions performed throughout the day that Norwalk students are able to focus on academics and be successful at school. The school nurses of Norwalk Public Schools are caring and committed to our students. By recognizing May 9th as School Nurse Appreciation Day, the Board of Education joins our schools, families, and community in honoring these dedicated professionals. So could I have a motion to make May 9th Nurse Appreciation Day? Ms. Keys, second. Mr. Lyons, all in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. And last of all, the Board of Ed would like to approve May as National Water Safety Month. As a shoreline city, Norwalk has many opportunities for students and community members to enjoy and experience the water. From swimming in the Sound to activities in the pool at Norwalk High School and more. This year, the Norwalk Board of Education recognizes May as National Water Safety Month. While we all know the joys of the water, statistics show that many deaths occur from drowning each year. According to the state, 62 children from birth to 19 drowned in Connecticut from 2004 to 2014. Drowning is responsible for more deaths among children 1 to 4 than any other cause except birth defects. Among this group, fatal drowning remains the second leading cause of unintentional injury-related death behind motor vehicle crashes. To bring awareness to families on how to enjoy aquatic activities safely from home and resort, pools, and spas, to water parks, and public swimming and water recreational facilities, Norwalk Public Schools is committed to working together with local partners. Earlier this year, Wolf Pit Elementary School Principal Jenna Masson was appointed co-chair of the Legislative Task Force on Water Safety Awareness. Mrs. Masson is working with leaders in kindergarten through 8th grade to offer simple and effective games outside of the pool to promote water safety. Additionally, a poster contest will kick off during the beginning of May. Winners will earn a prize, and their entries will be displayed at Calf Pasture and the Norwalk High School pool. All of our students should be able to safely enjoy the aquatic life that is such an integral part of living in Norwalk. By declaring May National Water Safety Month, the Board of Education encourages all Norwalk students, parents, and members of the community to save lives by spreading awareness about water safety. Could I have a motion to make May National Water Safety Month? Barbara, second. Julie, all in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. That's our little business, and now we will start with the workshop session, which is on middle school redesign, phase 3.
Thank you. Mr. Burks, Board, I'm just going to give a little bit of introduction here in terms of context, and then Mr. Fuller will review the presentation with you. We are going into the third year of middle school redesign. It was intended as a 3-year process. The first year, was grade 6, and that was the introduction of the block schedule. And the intention was that that would then move to 7th in the current year and 8th next year. In the process of settlement of a number of grievances that the NFT had filed over middle school redesign, that settlement allowed and involved and allowed, in fact it necessitated, going into the block schedule in both 7th and 8th grade this year, right? So in terms of the third year now that the structural aspect has been completed, the third year is really a question of refinement and pedagogy and improving teacher effectiveness, improving leadership of our middle schools. And you know, you just saw a wonderful video of what Roton has accomplished. And you know, tonight you'll see a fairly positive view of what is happening, but we still have too much variety among schools in middle school redesign. Some of it is a leadership issue, some of it is a talent issue, but as these refinements are made, that creates our focus for the next year, is getting all schools to the level that Roton is at today. And having all schools be as well led, as well taught, and having the same combination that has led to Roton's success and the incredible increase it has seen in student achievement. And I think Roton is also a great example of an experienced staff that stepped up and was willing to do things differently, and was willing to do more, and was willing to give it their all and their best professionally. And again, it sets a model for us, but it also creates a challenge for us as we look at doing this at the same level in other schools. So with that as introduction, Mr. Kruller is going to walk you through some design concepts and stats and some of the refinements for the next school year.
Okay, folks, thank you very much. I do want to throw out a shameless plug to Joe Bellucci and Roton, as did Dr. Adamowski. It is very fitting and apropos that we would have this meeting here tonight. Roton, without question, has made the most of the block schedule, both in terms of academic achievement, but also collaborative meeting time, encore. It's just success after success after success. So we're very proud of Roton and your leadership, Mr. Bellucci. It was very fitting to see that today, which really does say it all. I would like to have more of a conversation tonight than death by PowerPoint, so Janine Goss is here with me. Please feel free to chime in and ask questions. I assure you won't rattle us.
Can you maybe raise the microphone?
Sure.
I'm right by the vent. Thank you.
Okay. How's that? Better? Okay. All right, full steam ahead. Here we go. So I'm sure that you're all familiar with Norwalk's vision. Our goal is not just to do better. Our goal is to be the most successful school system in Connecticut. But in order to do that, we had to deal with a precipitous drop in student achievement from our highest scores in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade to some of our lowest in 7th grade. So we knew we had to do something to reform the middle schools. And we're actually making tremendous progress on that. We definitely are raising the bar and closing the gap. That's our motto. That's the credo that we live by. This is a very important slide because this was the single greatest determinant of where we went with middle school redesign. There were many, many things that we did. However, this OTL, which you see there in the first bar, has been research proven to affect student achievement the most. What you see there with OTL, opportunity to learn, is that no other factor, not computer adaptive software, not fancy programs, not feedback, not homework, more than anything else, extended learning time is what dramatically increases student achievement. And you can see an average percentile gain of 31%. And that is exactly the type of growth that we need to make for 3 to 5 years to close the achievement gap. So scheduling and opportunity to learn is very important.
We used to call it time on task.
Yes.
Same thing. What is the .88?
That is actually the average effect size. So what these are meta-analyses of sometimes 300, 500, 800 different studies. And that is the average effect size. So that's almost a full standard deviation. A 1.0 would be a full standard deviation.
So that means it has the largest effect.
Correct.
By the way,
based on national research.
20 or 30 years ago they did this.
Yes.
schools were doing everything but with dealing with the curriculum.
So this study actually comes from a landmark study at James Madison University from 1994 until 2006. It was a 12-year study. Dr. Adamowski, myself, and Dr. Connor, we are lifetime members of this organization called School Scheduling Associates, which is still run out of James Madison University. And that gave us access to all of their research from the study, as well as 5,000 middle school schedules to choose from. So this was a good start for us in our work on the Middle School Redesign Committee. This is essentially the schedule that we have. We've gone through this at length last year when we did the update, but I'm certainly open to questions. It is a 4-block A-B flexible block schedule. Some classes like language arts and mathematics are on the block. Others like electives and interventions are on what we call skinnies or half blocks, 42 minutes as opposed to 84 minutes. And then encore, which you're familiar with, we can squeeze in at our leisure by just shortening the blocks on any given day. Most schools tend to do it on a Friday afternoon, but it could be Monday morning, it could be during lunch, it could be first period or last period. It doesn't have to be fixed at all. In fact, it can flow through the block. This is what the master schedule actually looks like at all 4 middle schools. It's ever so slightly different at Roton because they don't have a complete third house, so some teachers have had to cross house or teach more than one subject. We're very proud of them for that. They really stepped up to do that. But essentially, an average middle school of 675 students is divided into 3 houses of 225 students with the goal of making a smaller learning community. There are only 3 teachers per team, which you see in 6th grade. So one of those 3 will teach both social studies and science, while the ELA and the math teacher teach the full program in the block. 7th and 8th grade, very similar, except there are 4-person teams where on A day they teach 7th grade social studies, and on B day they would teach 8th grade social studies. So they have 2 preps, 7th grade on A day and social studies on B day, and that's what I'm highlighting there with the blue and red.
And just for the board's clarification, the reason for that is that 6th grade teachers under Connecticut certification can teach any subject, right? Whereas 7th and 8th, in most cases, they have a single subject certification. So that's why the 0.5 in the subject between 7th and 8th in social studies and in science. And that's also another reason why houses, because we want a situation where students have the same teacher more than once during their experience in a house.
That is absolutely true, and there are other towns that have gone to 2-person teams or 5-person teams. A lot of it has to do with certification. We wanted to make sure that we could utilize the talent that we had. This is one of the reasons we went to the vertical house model. There is a tremendous amount of research, both in Hanover and other research groups that we subscribe to, about the 5 domains of best practice. This is what you get when you get a smaller learning community. So a group of 6th grade teachers, if there were 3 of us, they would only see the same 75 students all year long from September to June. And this is what we hope for. A little self-determination, better identity, personalization is the big reason, but also support for teaching and functional accountability. So it's much easier for those 3 teachers to keep track of those 75 students than having very large learning communities. So we expect the teachers to know, what they have for breakfast, what's going on with their parents, why they're late for school. It's a much smaller overall caseload.
Craig, can I?
Absolutely, please.
So, especially since it's highlighted here, when you say personalization, what do you mean by personalization?
We're moving in a direction of more personalized learning, where in the station rotation model, in both ELA and math, students can actually have their individual needs met rather than a generic group curriculum. There's really differentiation.
Okay, so difference between personalization and differentiation.
Yes.
Okay, but
Well,
there's
personalization is the end of the spectrum, right? So at the beginning of the spectrum, you have grouping, right? And then toward the middle, you have differentiation. The ultimate is personalization. When you look at the Teach to One math program, every child is moving at their own pace.
Right. So the
closer you can get to that, the more personalized.
So that's the aspiration is towards personalization.
No, we do have some elements of that. We do use a variety of computer adaptive software like Compass Learning, Khan Academy, MyPath, where 3 to 5 times a week students will get some very personalized learning. We take their NWEA scores and they're programmed into those programs, and that's the reason we chose them. and they actually get a very individualized path. So two students could be sitting right next to each other. One could be doing second grade subtraction with regrouping, and another could be doing fourth grade fractions with unlike denominator. So we're not quite there yet, but we are making progress on that personalization.
Thank you.
On a continuum from one side, from an old-fashioned one curriculum fits all to individualized personal, where would you say we stand as a district with our middle schools?
On like a scale of 1 to 10?
Yeah.
I'd say we're a solid 7. And we have elements of 8 with our computer adaptive software and our new lesson plan formats. We're making progress.
And when you say that, it's for each subject. Is each subject around 7 or 8?
I'd say we're doing a little better in ELA and mathematics because we have the block, and the block affords us the time to have that station rotation model where they can get
And in social studies, we have the resources, the material to differentiate, because it can be very expensive sometimes.
We do. We have actually written all new curriculum in ELA, mathematics, social studies, and world language. And you know the big one this summer, science is what's upcoming.
Dr. Kimball, I think that there would be a range by school, and I think the range might be 4 to 7.
Up on the screen, there's some interesting data. We had the good fortune to study this for a year before we implemented in 6th grade. We took a great deal of student agency surveys. We surveyed teachers and students, and what you see is actually the data from one of our middle school redesign meetings. Mr. Vellucci, you may remember this. I was very pleased that this is 6th grade teacher data, that the teachers themselves nominated student support as their #1 concern, and that's what you see down there in the right-hand corner. The 25 was the highest number. Support for students. A close second here was concern for student well-being in general, and then personalization was the 3rd highest on the list. This was actually very impressive that our 6th grade teachers responded this way. This is some of the data that we use to really develop the program. So if you look at what we did in year 1, we changed the schedule and we put in interventions, and that is exactly what the teacher surveys told us. That was of most concern. So those were steps 1 and 2 right there. Change the schedule, put in more interventions. So these are some of our partners that we work with. You're familiar with these, I'm sure. CSSR, the Center for Secondary School Reform. They've been in the district about 8 years working with Brian McMahon High School. And Suzanne Korshitz, the former principal of Brian McMahon High School, is now a partner, a consultant with them, and does a lot of work with us on both advisory and student-led conferences. So she's worked with all 4 middle schools as well. We also work with the International Center for Leadership and Education. This is the Rigor Relevance Matrix. We do have a Rigor Relevance Academy at Merrimack Elementary School. And in fact, they were selected this year to go to model schools in Orlando as a model school, one of about 40 in the United States. So we do a lot of work on rigor and relevance. And that's really the focus of our administrative PD as well. All year long at each principal's meeting, we've been training the principals steadily on rigor, relevance, and relationships. These are some of our primary interventions, our primary intervention partners. Read 180, Math 180, System 44, which is a phonics-based program for non-readers. And these have now our Scholastic products, which was now recently purchased by HMH. And we've had tremendous success, so much success, in fact, that I just came from Boston this afternoon where I spoke at the National Math Summit. We were the school, spotlight school from all 50 states. We had the highest reading in Math 180 scores in the United States. So of 4,113 districts that use these products, Norwalk was #1. Our average student in these interventions grows 3 times normal, 147 quantile and lexile points. You would hope that a student could grow 50 quantile points a year. Our students are growing almost 150. So we've had tremendous luck with these interventions. We're not wed to them in any way. If something better comes along, we'll jump on it, but we're getting tremendous results in our intervention classrooms.
Is it common to use at middle school level phonics-based reading interventions?
It is for students who don't read. It's a low level intervention.
And are they
ready for Read 180.
Generally, these students new arrivals, or they've been? How long have they been in the school system in general?
Some could be recent arrivals, others could have been in the school system for quite some time. But this is our last chance to prepare them to read before they go to high school, which is why we we made our stand, so to speak, in middle school.
I think the majority.
That's pretty late, by the way.
I think the majority have been with us for the duration and never quite learned to read on grade level at the end of 3rd grade, which is why we have the equity program that we have in all of our elementary schools now. It's why we're engaged in summer learning at the elementary level. And it's why in 4th and 5th, which were the lowest of our elementary grades, why we now have introduced Achieve 3000 and the other personalized learning programs. And so I think that some of this was a large number of students coming to middle school not prepared, not reading, but then when they were here in 6th grade, their scores dropped even further, and there was this fall off the cliff from 5th to 6th, which has now been addressed to a large degree, fully addressed in math and partially addressed in ELA.
And if I may, this is a budget issue. Of course, this goes right back to that criteria for promotion, which we've talked to at other meetings. If we're going to continue to promote students that are just above 21 percentile or 20 percentile, we will find ourselves in a desperate situation in middle school. And those kids are not going to graduate high school. They wouldn't be able to. So this situation we have to address at the elementary level. And when we look at the different scenarios and how much they will cost.
This has been going on for a long time.
We have to
and there was no accountability and just push up, push up, push up. And these kids would come in and I don't know if you remember, there was a whole big scandal when Bob McCain was when Susan Marks first arrived, when he was the principal at Nathan Hale. And he had a group of students in 6th grade that were illiterate. And he created these special classes but didn't follow all the rules. Former board member Shirley Mosby went after him, and the state shut him down, and he ended up leaving the district and went to run a charter school in Hartford.
The point is, when we do look at the costs, when we cost it out, the scenarios of raising the percentiles, we will have to factor in the later expenses that we probably would not have.
That's correct.
Yep.
An ounce of prevention is worth a
Yes.
pound of cure in 8th grade. I agree with that. That's the long-term goal, to minimize remediation later and have prevention.
And on the other end, if you look at the measures of the vision, of our vision statement, you'll see that at the end of 8th grade, in order to be able to do high school work successfully, a student should have a Lexile score of 110, which is the best statistical predictor we now have of being able to be successful in high school and do high school work. So we don't want to move students from 5th to 6th who are not reading on grade level. We don't want to move students from 8th to 9th who do not have a sufficient Lexile score. So those are really the checkpoints that we're working toward.
Okay, that's a quick overview of the why. Before we get to sort of the data review, any questions? Sarah?
Can I go back a couple slides?
Sure.
You don't have to go back, I can just find it on the paper. One of the 5 domains of best practice. Can you talk to me a little bit about support for teaching as one of those domains of best practice? Because I know at Roton things have been very successful and there seems to be a lot of support for teaching here.
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the big things that we're most proud of with Middle School Redesign is the chance for teachers to collaborate. They now have the opportunity to meet every day, either by grade level or by subject area team, and that, we feel, is what's going to make the difference in terms of teacher support. That's when we can send in coaches to work with them. That's when they can work together to tackle common problems. That was a luxury that we didn't have before. So that's one of the more positive parts of Middle School Redesign, giving teachers the opportunity to collaborate.
Is there any planning for using teachers here who have been successful to do some teaching in other buildings?
Absolutely. We call that like a train-the-trainer type model. We have done some cross-pollination. We also have some coaches that we've been able to procure from CES who've been able to go to all 4 middle schools in both ELA and math, and that's worked very well as well. Because they now have the time, the coach is able to meet with the whole grade level team and then go into the classroom individually and coach. Right now, just in ELA and math, perhaps next year in science.
I think your question also begs another question, and that is, should we be considering teacher exchanges among schools? So I think we need to think about that.
I think that's an interesting idea. And I also was just wondering, what's the mechanism for further, say, for example, you have a teacher, there's a training that happens, meets a whole good level team, and then you have a teacher who's still struggling. Is it like a speaking bill kind of a question? Or?
No, we would send a coach specifically to meet more often with that teacher. We do that now. There's always more support that we would like to provide.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
If I could, I'm sorry I was late. Just a public service announcement. There's a gray Volvo, license plate ends in 301. Your lights are on out in the parking lot. You're here. Okay.
If you don't mind, coming up to work, it's come up before. Again, it's an old issue, and it's something that's got to constantly be on everyone's minds. In the discussion of some of our other issues around rollouts, particularly the AT programs and stuff, it's kind of been suggested that our Tier 1 instruction may not be as rigorous as we want. Now, differentiation is one thing, it's good. That begs the question, once you differentiate, is the actual work, the instruction, at the appropriate rigor? And again, on a scale from 1 to 10, on average, for the district, where would you say we are in terms of, number one, we've already established that we're doing okay, we're moving forward with differentiation, but once you do have the differentiation, is the appropriate rigor there? Where would we be from scale 1 to 10?
So there's a number of dimensions of this question. Right? Rigor is defined at one level by curriculum. So this is the first year that we have had curriculum in reading and ELA and math 6 through 8. Our first year, right? So it's brand new. It was certainly designed at a rigorous level, but everyone has to learn to implement it. And so, again, this is a question of variety among schools and how long does it take an experienced staff who have not worked with this. And then we have the issue of science, our lowest level, where we have no curriculum. So I think you could conclude in that area we have no rigor. Our scores are low. The state scores are low, our scores are even lower. And so that's our most recent area of challenge, where we have to develop curriculum this summer, but we also have to put into effect a coaching mechanism. We have to provide teachers with materials, kits, in order to do experiments. We can't just say this should be experientially based and you can go figure it out. This requires an infrastructure, right? And it requires an investment in training, an investment in materials, and an investment in curriculum.
Thank you.
Again, I think it's a fair question. There are many elements of rigor. Part of middle school redesign, though, is to really engage the student by the teachers having strong relationships with the students, hence the smaller learning communities. You can't get to rigor unless all those things are in place. You need good, solid curriculum. You need time for the teachers to meet, but you also need time for the students to interact with the teachers. Dr. Costanzo and I have been working with Choose Love and Sandy Hook Promise, and I will tell you point blank that all of these organizations quote the same research that if a child can connect with just 2 adults, just 2, not 22, just 2 adults, the chances of violence, depression, suicide go to almost 0. So you have to have positive relationships between the teachers and students to get to rigor. So we're working on that as well. We're actually going to implement some programs this spring along those lines. And that's basically the fundamental part, Dr. Kimmel, of what we're doing with the administrators, to work on all 3 of these simultaneously, not just the curriculum piece. So here's a quick summary of where we're at. I think Dr. Adamski said this best, so I'll go quickly. But because we were able to combine phase 2, so that 6th, 7th, and 8th could be on the block schedule this year, we're essentially a year ahead of schedule, which allows us a great opportunity to really fine-tune our coaching and our curriculum and do a little bit more progress with accountability. This summer we will actually be writing short cycle assessments for every single ELA and math unit in grades 6 through 8, as well as writing all new science K-12. It's just simply the most we can do, or 5 or 6 weeks every summer. So we've been busy, Janine and I, the last few summers working on this. Again, we're entering middle school redesign phase 3. We'll have some more slides on this in a minute. We really want to focus on these 4 things: short cycle assessments, which I just mentioned, student-led conferences, which we're already doing in 6th grade, and I'll show you a short video on that in a minute. But also, we want to work on differentiation and personalization, you said, as well, and then certainly work on science. We're also building 2 new schools. The new Honus will be a K-8 STEM school, and Columbus will also be a K-8 school as well. So we're kind of changing the middle school model a bit, so parents will have choices rather than just a traditional middle school. Okay, we've received quite a bit of recognition over the last 2 years. We were at the Regional Math Summit last year. We were at the National Math Summit today in Boston. We were a District of Innovation last year for model schools. There were 5,000 people come, 500 apply, and 12 were picked. I'm proud to say that Norwalk Public Schools was considered a District of Innovation due to middle school redesign last year. And believe it or not, that footnote you see on the bottom, Merrimack will be going back again this year as a model school. That's almost unprecedented to go to model schools 2 years in a row. The only other district in Connecticut that has ever done it is Meriden, and it's just highly unusual to go to model schools 2 years in a row. The team from Roton did present recently in Boston at the ASCD conference, and Dr. Lewis and I took a red eye after the February 15th PD Day and spoke at the National Middle School Conference on Core Plus More, which is essentially about block scheduling and innovation. So we're pretty excited about that people are taking notice. All right, what's the secret sauce? I wish I could take credit for this word. This actually comes from Dr. David Bain. Last year around this time, Dr. Bain presented with Janine and I, Dr. Connor, and Al Saki when we gave our first update, phase 1 of middle school redesign, and he used this term for Norwalk called the secret sauce. We first met Dr. Bain in November of 2016. He's the head statistician for HMH in Chicago, and we said, gee, well, what are you doing here in Norwalk? Why are you giving us our data? Can't we get that from our local rep? And he said, well, you're a top 10 school. We said, what does that mean? He said, well, your scores put you in the top, I said 10%. He goes, no, top 10 for the whole United States. He follows Poughkeepsie, New York, Norwalk, Asbury Park, New Jersey. We actually outpaced Asbury Park, New Jersey only by 1/10 of a point, but we had the highest math and reading intervention scores last year again in the whole United States. So it was great. Dr. Bain actually came to our board meeting, some of you might recall, and presented that data. So we're pretty
Again, to put this in context, this is the Read 180 and Math 180 for students in intervention is where the greatest gains were.
Correct. He said it takes courage and also fidelity of implementation, which we're working on steadily. And we have some tremendous partnerships with people right here in Connecticut, like the Center for Secondary School Reform, as well as HMH, ICLE. We've really had some great partnerships that have helped us with middle school redesign. So I want to give a great shout out right now before we do the data review to all the teachers and administrators, because it really is massive, unprecedented growth on many, many fronts, which you see both in a variety of data. I'm going to go quickly through the next few slides, but I encourage you to ask questions. You have the PowerPoint in front of you. If you have questions about the data, I'm happy to go into that. But it does take a village. And no matter how you slice it, we are making progress in Norwalk. Whether you look at NWEA scores, whether you look at SBAC scores, whether you look at the Connecticut Accountability Index, the growth is massive. When all the needles are pointing in the same direction, you know that you're truly making progress. We're not relying on any one metric or a company metric to tell us that we're doing well. We have a number of independent criterion reference, nationally normed tests that we take here in Norwalk, like NWEA. This happens to be 6th, 7th, and 8th grade math. And you can see the growth from 16 to 27th percentile, approximately 11 percentile points. Nationally, a 6th grader only grows about 6 points. So we're looking at 2 times normal right here. 7th grade, about 5 points. This is a 17-point gain, more than 3 times the national average. And in 8th grade, a 17-point gain. The average 8th grader only grows 4 points. We grew 17, more than 4 times the national average. This is just growth on an exponential scale.
Is this 1 year?
Yep, this is last year's results. So tremendous.
I want to question the board. These are not results that can be replicated every year, right?
Absolutely.
This is the effect of low-hanging fruit, children who never had intervention before. Now they have it, right? You funded it in your budget, we did it, we invested in it, and students who were at the very bottom came up significantly as a result.
And this was driven by Read 180.
A lot of it
Read
was.
180, Math 180, System 44.
Right. The good news, though, is that we've doubled the number of students this year taking intervention, literally from 352 to more than 600. So we're on track. We're about 2 points ahead in ELA and about 1 point behind in math, but we're doing very well. But as Dr. Adamowski said, you won't do it forever, but it's nice to do it 2 years in a row.
How are you determining who is on these programs and when they exit out?
That is a great question. What we did last year is we tested all fifth graders on the RI and the MI, that's the reading inventory and the math inventory. And then what we realized this year is we're getting better at it. We don't have to test everybody. We know from the NWEA test that everybody at the 49th percentile or below, which is about a 210 RIT score, is likely to qualify for intervention. So now we test half the students, get better results, and have a third metric to look at the students. So we'll be testing it again at the end of this month, all the fifth graders below the 50th percentile. So we're throwing our safety net far and wide, just to make sure we don't miss anything. Unfortunately, nationally, the 50th percentile is not likely to pass the SBAC test and will probably need intervention. I just want to be honest. The 50th percentile used to be average, it is far from average today. A 50th percentile child will probably not pass the SBAC. You need to be about the 66th to 68th percentile to do well on these national tests. I have to share the statistic with you. In Connecticut, only 42% of students are proficient on the SBAC in math, and only 54% in ELA. These tests are rigorous. So in the state of Connecticut, 40 to 50% actually pass the SBAC.
Should it be higher?
Some people would say it should be higher, other people would say the tests are too tough, but that is the mark, so we've got to raise the bar.
No, that issue keeps coming up. It started with core curriculum, national, because they try, and we see it with the national assessment, the samples that are done every 2 years. Any test, it's the level of difficulty, if it's somewhere similar to what internationally is going on, we're generally hover around 40 percentile. And this is so for comparative purposes. Prior to, I would say around 2007, around that time, every state was playing fast and loose with not only the quality of the test, but where the cuts were, who was proficient, who wasn't proficient. Yet when they would take any kind of rigorous test, the national, what do you call that? The National Educational Progress, right? They would go down about 40 points. And that was equivalent to what Asians and Europeans were taking in terms of difficulty. So we are catching up as a nation when it comes to a lot of this stuff. Now here we are in the middle of Connecticut in Fairfield County. You're absolutely right. This is indicative of, puts the budget discussion we just had in a larger context, what we're asking for. I remember 3 years ago sitting on the council side, I used it to my jaw drop when Dr. Adamowski said we had no intervention programs. I said, what? That's not a balanced approach to budgeting when you allow something to slide right into the pool without any life support. And that's what was happening, and we're beginning to see it right now.
Can you, Greg, tie this? Oh, sorry, Barbara.
Do we have enough capacity for the demand for intervention?
We're close to the max. We're filled 599 of the 607 seats. We're very close to the max, and we're quite proud of the fact that we budgeted and planned accordingly. We're close.
But we don't need more?
No. In fact, we should need less as time goes on, because for the first time ever, Norwalk's third and fourth graders actually beat the state average. No one has been able to recall when that's ever happened in Norwalk before. So as those students matriculate into middle school, we should need less. Very good question, but we're hoping less.
So, because if I remember when we started all this, the big emphasis was, especially on reading, if you're not reading at grade level by third grade, you're never going to. So there was this huge emphasis on K through 3, which we've done. So one would assume when we started that, which I can't remember how many years ago that was, as those kids start working their way through the system, we're going to need less of this conceptually.
Yes, absolutely.
And could you explain on, when you showed us this block schedule, and just tie this in with we've got 600 plus students across the district are, getting these services, Read 180, the different interventions. So in that block 4 and the B day, I guess, so it's not happening every day, it's every other day.
So a student has an opportunity to take 4 electives. One is always gym. So that leaves 3. So they could take math and read 180 and still have 1 more elective. Or if they only needed 1 intervention, they could have 2 electives. If they needed no interventions, they could have 4 electives. But it is a zero-sum game. There's a finite limit to the number of
So
electives.
those electives are foreign language.
Chorus, band, foods, tech ed, computers. It's a little bit different at every school, like Dr.
The only place where they would lose out is if they had 2 interventions, they would not be able to take an instrument lesson, which is another reason why we need to introduce the instrument lessons in elementary school.
And just so I'm clear, if somebody has to do intervention and can't take the language, can they re-enter the language program once they're
They
out?
can take intervention and the
Yes.
language.
Ah.
The one area that they're closed out from now, if they take 2 interventions, is an instrument lesson, which is why you see at PONUS. PONUS
Is
has
that
the...
across the board in all 4 schools?
Well,
Because I don't think it is.
Well, it has to do with the number of students that require 2 interventions. So PONUS, for example, has the lowest number of children in the band, right? And that's because they have so many children that are taking 2 interventions. So again, all of these things are curable, right? They all require investments and planning. And one of the things in light of our budget situation, we have a meeting of the Finance Committee on the 10th, and so we have revised the goals we can accomplish, and we've been able to revise downward the adjustments that we have to make. But one of the things I'm recommending is that we do 6 schools for band instrument lessons next year, or enable 6 schools to have band instrument lessons next year instead of 4. So that the following year, we'll be able to accomplish everything in the high school for next year. And the following year, the only things we have left are the 6 remaining elementary schools for the 30-minute extension, and the 6 who don't have instrument lessons, giving them instrument lessons. And we're able to pair that, so those that advance 30 minutes next year, they will not have the instrument lessons. Those that don't will get the instrument lessons, and then we'll flip the following year.
You did ask a question, Barbara, that I didn't really hear an answer to. How do the kids, as they, improve with these interventions, how do they cap out and then go back mainstream or not need them anymore?
Well, they do cap out, and we do that sometimes at the mid-year in January. The joke, we've been so successful with math and Read 180 that we call it like Read 90 and Math 90. We actually exit about 26% of the students in January, so they can take an elective the second half of the year. The goal is to get them out of, the reason it's called Math and Read 180 is it should not take more than 180 days, 1 calendar year to quote-unquote fix that child. We've actually been able to do it in 90 because of the way we schedule, because they can get it every day.
So they get tested at the end, sorry.
They get tested 5 times a year in each of those interventions. There's constant.
And those are specific tests from Math 180 and Read 180, not the typical assessments we do.
We also have the NWA score as an independent measure too, to see if can they break 220. 220 is the magic number on NWA where they no longer need intervention. If they're a 235, we know they're algebra ready. We have multiple independent metrics to gauge whether those interventions will work.
Sorry, Scott.
No, that's okay, thanks, Mike. So I think I know we're getting into the weeds a little bit on this, but I think it does impact the ability to talk about the middle school redesign. So do you have then data on the students that are being phased out of those interventions? And I'm also comparing this to looking at the data that we're seeing here. It's great to see the whole school data or the by grade data, but I'm wondering what subgroups of students we are not serving as well, and thinking about why are those students not being served as well? Is it because the program is not meeting their needs? Is it because there's a fidelity of implementation issue? Is there something else that's impacting whole subgroups of students so that they're not being removed from they're no longer needing that level of intervention? Is it because they're further behind the students that are phasing out of interventions? Are they only 1 year behind, and the students that still need them, are there multiple years behind?
I think a major factor for those students is our lack of summer learning at the middle school level. We will catch up to that. As you know, we've been adding a grade a year, As we go into this next summer, we will have 5th grade for the first time. But then it's the next 3 years, it's 6th, 7th, and 8th. And, you know, students develop an achievement gap by not gaining a year of instruction. And then they have regression during the summer if they don't have summer learning. So, you know, we do have a group of students who start off very low. They make gains, but there's some regression on those gains during the summer. And then they have, you know, they're still in a place of intervention the following year.
To answer your question, the students who do exit legitimately. They have to break 220 on the RIT score and NWA, or they have to achieve 1,050 on the MI. We don't just randomly exit them. They exit when they're ready.
We have had, this is one of the areas I think where fidelity has been very good.
Right.
We've had an excellent, highly trained group of Read 180 and Math 180 teachers. These programs are very precise. They're not for everyone. A lot of people can't teach them because they are so regimented. You have to follow the methodology exactly. And if you do, the national research says you'll get between 1.5 years to 2 years growth.
And are we seeing the same percentage then of students that are exiting because they've met those benchmark scores that we would expect them to meet to say they no longer needed interventions? Are we seeing the percentage of students that are exiting, I think, what did you say, 25, 26%? Is that across the board at each school? Or are you seeing some schools that's...
It's about 20% across the board. One school in particular is much higher.
Okay.
Yes, that's a fair question, but it's more than 20% across the board.
Just think about implementation with fidelity and, okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. So,
I don't know if you want to address this now or later, but you know, there have been references that things are done differently. You know, it's not the same at each middle school. And is there a desire in this next phase to make it more uniform, or do we like the fact that each one is a little different?
I think the interventions are very uniform,
right,
but we do have variances in other.
Well, we don't like the fact that the achievement is not uniform. Right. So you only have room for variety in implementation if you can get the same level of achievement. And again, I think in this area, as in other areas, we are hitting up against a talent wall at this point. And so that is not unusual, by the way. The first couple of years of a reform, you're introducing new things. Leadership is rising from the district itself. But, you know, now you're still working in many cases with people who were not the early implementers and who have been doing something the same way for 20 years, and you hit the talent wall. That's going to be our biggest challenge, I think. And I think evening out the variety in terms of implementation and rigor among schools is a very big part of that in the future.
This is what the data looks like visually. This is the exact same data. We just put it in a graph. So you can see just massive growth in both 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. This happens to be math. Very similar in ELA, 37th to the 49th percentile, 36th to the 59th, and 50th to the 70th. And I was here a little bit earlier than I was calculating. In ELA, for 6th grade, this is 2 times normal growth. In 7th grade, it's 5 times normal growth. And in 8th grade, it's actually, again, 5 times normal. So we're getting more than our 2 years worth out of the interventions. We're actually doing quite well, so we're pretty pleased about that. So it looks like visually, you can see just massive growth. Same exact story on the SBAC. These are just, it's hard to quantify growth at this level. The state grows about 3 to 4 points a year, and you can see we're growing 9, more than 5, 6, we're basically doubling what the state is growing. And that's the way you close the achievement gap. Same exact story in ELA. Grades 6 and 7 actually look flat. They grew about a point, but we were the only district in the entire DERG that did not decline. So growing a point is a massive victory when the other 11 districts declined by 10 points. So we look at this as an 11-point.
Well, the state also went down.
Yes.
Right. So some of this is attributed, they say, to different forms of the test. So generally, when you have a year like that, the next year you have a different form and things go up. So again, this is all about staying ahead of average state growth.
Intervention growth we discussed, just quite massive in math and ELA. This year, 73% growing more than 100 quantile points. That's 2 years growth. The actual average in math was 147 quantile points, 143 in reading, 66%. That's 2 out of every 3 students made more than 2 years growth. So we're actually quite thrilled about that, and we were recognized by both model schools for that.
I don't really understand, Craig, what do you mean?
So the average student in
The
intervention,
73% grew.
right? So basically, 3 out of every 4 students that were in Math 180
Grew
made
by
more
more.
than 2 years growth.
Okay.
You'd hope for 50 quantile points. The reason it only says greater than 100 is because the company's metric, they're not used to growth. Norwalk is off the charts. Their chart only goes to 100. We actually need columns for 150, 200, 250, 350. That's the kind of exponential growth that we're getting. It's very interesting. We have students that grew 5 years growth, 350 points, 7 years growth. It's quite impressive.
Why are we doing that much better than?
We had dedicated interventionists this year. We improved upon our own model, and we actually implement with fidelity. Because we have a teacher who only teaches Math 180, only teaches Read 180 at each middle school. Each middle school, due to grants, is given 1 Math 180 and 1 Read 180 teacher, and then if they can supplement in their own local budget, they do that as well. So when you have a dedicated teacher, you can super train them. The coaches come every week to work with the interventionists, but instead of working with 35 teachers, they only work with 19 this year across all 4 middle schools. So you get a better trained teacher.
Mike, it's a great question. And imagine a situation where you have very little classroom differentiation, you don't have a lot of rigor, and you don't have any interventions. Kids' language.
Add combo.
Okay, and so the student, the rate of growth, of course, will go down.
Right.
But what we're saying is, I think Dr. Adamowski referred to as the low-hanging fruit. We had to do something. Nothing was being done. And the city was in some ways in denial, it's the phrase I used before, about what was going on. Finally, we're learning it costs money, and we have to plan. But I don't think we have a choice as a city.
And I think, seeing these gains in Tier 2 instruction, which we didn't have before, the other thing that occurs is this also shifts now the need to Tier 1 instruction.
Yes.
Which is where, differentiation and grouping should occur, and where rigor needs to be part of the regular curriculum.
So I would agree with that, and we're rapidly closing in what I would call the new normal. So once we have another banner year here where all the students who need intervention are getting it, essentially 599 out of 607, we're almost maxed out. That will be our new baseline. Because our real baseline will be how we perform this year. What you see in this picture is, this is all students in Math 180. And essentially, everybody in the white and above the stair step here, is doing phenomenal. These are the students growing 2 to 3 times normal. However, there are a handful, about 10% in the pink here, who still need a little bit of work. So overall, about 90% of our students making massive growth. And what you see on the graph is the bell curve. It's almost a perfect sine wave, and we have pushed it more than a full standard deviation to the right. Now, there's 15 percentile points or more. Just define the odds any way you look at it. But it's quite impressive, actually. Norwalk growth. It's not incremental, it's exponential on these interventions. This is a bigger version of the same thing, so you can see the growth. The number of students making 200-point gains is a full standard deviation to the right. That's like 4 years growth in 1 year, so we're quite proud of that. We do want to talk a little bit about the Connecticut Accountability Index. It actually, we heard this from last week. We are scoring extremely well at 76.9. That puts us within 3 points of our affluent Fairfield County neighbors, 2 of whom are competing, believe it or not. Easton and Reading, we have higher accountability scores, and we are within 3.1 points of Weston and Roton and Westwood. So we're quite proud of that. The highest 2 performing districts in the entire state actually touch us. Darien and Buchanan. Darien at 85.7 and Buchanan at 89.1. So nobody in this entire state has broken 90%. So 80 is the new 90, like orange is the new black, 80 is the new 90. And we are rapidly closing in on 80 percentile points. This puts us solidly in the top half. I said this frequently. When I first came to Norwalk, we were literally 13th from the bottom. We were one of the first 13 priority districts. We're now ranked 78 out of 169. of all towns. But if you look at just the K-12 towns, there are 118 of those. We're actually ranked 55 out of 118. So no matter how you rank Norwalk, we've gone from 13 from the bottom to clearly in the top half. So we're quite proud of these accountability scores. We were number 2, sad to say. East Haddam, a beautiful but sleepy Deep River town on the Connecticut River, beat us by a 1/10 of a point. You know, gold, silver there at the buzzer. That is a town with 903 students all on one campus. Hardly a comprehensive district like ours with 20 schools and almost 12,000 students. But for transparency and honesty, we were number 2. We grew about 55.6 points, which you see here on the chart. And just for comparison, the state of Connecticut grew less than 2 points. They grew 1.8 points, and we grew 56.6. So it's quite impressive. The next slide I wanted to put in because you say, well, what does DIRG H mean? There are 9 DIRGs in the state of Connecticut. We're H, the lowest is I. There's only really one lower than us if you look at the Bridgeports and the Waterburys and New Britain and Hartford and New Haven. If you looked at decile rank, if you divided income into the top 10 towns in Connecticut, we'd actually be about the 3rd decile. But just for comparison's sake, how did we do against Fairfield County? So I had this slide made up, and you can see that, you know, forget about the DIRG. Let's see how we're doing compared to Fairfield County. We're actually beating towns in Fairfield County. And when we break 80%, which I predict we will, we'll be doing even better than several others of these towns. So it's very respectable growth. It's something every Norwalk taxpayer, educator, teacher, parent, stakeholder should be proud of. These are really impressive results. It's difficult to break 80% in the state of Connecticut. That puts you in the top 50 schools, 55 schools out of 169.
When they calculate the, I know how they fit it in when Roton School received the accolades that it received. How do they calculate the achievement gap, closing the achievement gap in a town like Darien?
So if you have more than 30 students in any subgroup, that group is counted and you're measured against that.
So quite often they do not have enough students to have
they don't even have enough.
a subgroup comparison because they're so homogeneous.
So in a way, their task is much easier.
Oh, much easier.
Than the one we have to go. In just statistically,
yes,
it's much easier.
Yes. So you'll see a poverty rate of 2% rather than 66%.
Well, just a point on that one. So that has been one of the major issues with the law, the federal law that is now being implemented. And so every state has the ability to decide what their end size is. So what that number is, if it's 30, if it's 20, whatever that is. And so that's been pretty controversial across the country on how to determine what that size of students is, especially in rural school districts, where you're never going to get to those students. And so some states have created additional formulas and mechanisms to create, they can call them super subgroups or other ways of looking at achievement gaps, so your highest and your lowest performers, no matter what other subgroups they belong to. But that has been highly controversial across the country, and how more urban or larger school districts are disproportionately impacted by some of the requirements of the federal law. So yes, it's felt, and it's felt across the country. Some states have been more progressive in adapting their accountability indexes to adjust for some of those issues.
Just as a side, the thing that impressed me among many things with the accountability index and what they did in Connecticut, and I'm sure it's common now, you can't just teach to the test anymore because you can fall apart in a variety of other areas. And like, I'm curious about our music is not where we should be. Not our arts are not where they should be. If you look at number 13.
Actually, access to the arts, I think we got full points. I think actually
we got full?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I thought I
we dramatically increased our physical fitness participation, but our actual fitness rate needs to improve a little bit. So
the point is, it's diversified.
Yes,
it's
very
diversified. That's the thing.
This is the balanced scorecard begun in Charlotte-Mecklenburg and adopted by a number of states to meet the new ESEA requirements. But the requirements are that you have a balanced scorecard and that you have multiple indicators. Sarah?
While that slide is up, and I don't know if this is the right time to speak to this or not, but I had the thought when we were talking about support for teaching on the other side, are related arts teachers in the group meetings in the houses? Are they a part of that? And if so, if not, is there?
In most cases, no. They're providing planning time for the teachers to be in the house meetings.
So that being the case, I had thought with, and you had talked about the talent wall in quotes, or the flexibility wall or whatever, in terms of using our related arts teachers to double up on curricular ideas in that block time. I don't know if that's something that's been thought of. I had at one of the middle school redesign meetings, a year ago or something, brought it up very briefly with Dr. Connor, and he was like, yes, and then we had to move on to something else. But I think integrating arts in terms of our accountability index will also hit some of this kids who are getting multiple interventions and not having access to the arts or not having access to a language. If we can include related arts teachers in collaboration with our core teachers as far as, finish my sentence.
That's difficult to do during the normal school day because they're essentially on duty, which gives the teachers a chance to collaborate
So
and
it's a
meet. But it would have to
schedule
be, before or after school or some other deep venue. But I would defer to Dr. Crisanto on that. We're actually exploring all the time how to improve PD offerings.
Yeah.
So in terms of Durg H, I don't think we could do any better. I mean, we're just crushing it. But this is really for your benefit. How are we doing against Durg A? We're holding our own. We're competitive, even against the best schools in Connecticut. So I'm quite proud of that. These are the individual school scores which you have. I'm not going to go into these in detail except to mention one thing. If you notice, many of them got dinged not in math and ELA, but science, hence the need to rewrite new science curriculum this summer. And here is a different comparison that you may or may not have seen. These are the quartiles. The state now ranks the schools top 25%. That's green, group 1, top 50%, group 2, the bottom quartile, group 3 and 4. And many of these schools would have moved up a complete quartile if they had done a little bit better in science. In other words, I'm looking right at Cranberry and Brookside and Merrimack, I believe, would have moved up a whole category with a little bit better performance in science. So we're really looking forward to writing new science curriculum. But this is a very respectable showing, and next year we'll do better. We even had a school of distinction, Roton School. Not only was it in category 1, but you have to be in the top 10%, which is about 112 schools in Connecticut to get that award. So pretty impressive. Okay, that's a lot of data to throw at you, I know, in a short time.
But some of it we've seen before.
Yes,
so.
you have, yeah. Questions on the data before we move on? Okay, so this is what we've accomplished so far with middle school redesign. These are our 7 initial tenets or understandings. I think Sarah probably remembers some of these from the early meetings. So we've accomplished 5 of them. We're really looking forward to roundtables and advisory and extending student-led conferences up into 7th and 8th grade next year. I do want to take a minute to talk a little bit about student-led conferences and advisory. I have a short video to show you. Chris, you just click on that link. Sometimes the videos worth 1,000 words, so it's about 6 minutes.
This spring, all students will participate in student-led conferences, also called SLCs. Today, we'll look at the correct way to conduct an SLC. This is David. Tonight, he has an SLC scheduled. He feels totally unprepared. Who said that? Watch what happens when he arrives with his parents to start the conference. What are you looking for? The purpose of a student-led conference is for the student to actually lead the conference. Let's see if we can help David. He keeps talking about me. David, say freeze. What? Just say freeze, okay? Freeze. going to help you get through this SLC, but you're going to have to do your part. Whenever you reach a part of the conference where you aren't sure what to do, just say freeze, and I'll step in and help you.
All right, cool.
You have a script that your advisory teacher gave you, so use it and take notes on it if you want. That's it. Now, the first part of the student-led conference is the introduction. Here are the important points. First, make eye contact.
Eye contact? Why?
It makes you look more confident and in charge. Next, introduce your parents and your teacher. And always allow the females to be seated before the males.
Why?
It's good manners. Be a gentleman.
So how do I do this?
Just say freeze backwards.
Freeze backwards.
No, David. Actually say the word freeze in reverse. Zerf.
Zero. Mom, Dad, this is my teacher was explaining. Explaining to my parents.
Ladies first.
Right. Freeze. Now what?
The next part of your presentation is to tell the others the purpose of the conference. There are three main things you're here to do. One, you want to show what classes you've chosen for next year. Two, you want to share samples of some work you did this year along with a reflection. And three, you'll discuss your academic plans for the future, including career interests.
All right, so classes, samples, and academic plans.
That's right. The next part will be to explain the agenda for the meeting. Just briefly go over what you will discuss in the conference.
Okay, zero. Now, our agenda for this meeting is to discuss the classes that I'm taking. I'll show you some sample works so that I can reflect on it and tell you what I've been doing in these classes. And we'll end by discussing my academic plans and goals. Freeze. I'm talking about classes first, right?
That's right. You've been working on that in advisory. All that information should be in your folder.
Got it. I can do this. Perfect. Zero. And these are the classes that I'm planning to take.
David is showing them the 4 core classes he's chosen and explaining why he chose them. He's also telling them which 3 electives he plans to take and why he chose them. Some electives are required for graduation, so he's using a credit check sheet to talk about graduation requirements. He also has a Chromebook handy, so he can look up the CAP book and use it to explain the content of his classes.
Freeze.
Great job going over your classes, David.
Thanks. It was actually pretty easy. We prepared for all of this in advisory class. Now I'm gonna need help with this next part though.
The next part is your reflection of some of your work. Do you remember picking out 2 examples of work?
Yeah, I got a good one and a bad one. Wrote a reflection about it. I got this. Zero.
Wow, David is really taking charge now. He's showing his parents a project he did really well on and telling what he liked about it. Now he's showing a project he didn't do so well on. He's explaining why he thinks it didn't go so well and what he learned that will help him to do better. The next part is where David will share his academic plans and goals. David, you can freeze now so we can talk about this. Okay, well, it looks like David's getting pretty comfortable leading this conference. He's showing his parents the career clusters he's worked on in advisory, and they're discussing what all this means. David mentions that he's thinking that he would like to maybe be an engineer someday, so he's created an academic plan that will help him to be prepared. He has an idea of which classes he'll need to take in high school to prepare him for a college engineering program, and he's set goals for the grades and test scores he thinks he'll need to achieve. He's even put together a list of colleges that he thinks will be a good fit for him.
Freeze.
Is everything okay?
I just wanted to say thanks. It's been a lot easier, mainly because we work on it at advisory. And look how impressed my parents are. They're really impressed with me right now. Feels pretty good. Anyways, I'm gonna go now. Zero.
You're welcome, David, and great job. David is now in the last part of the conference, the conclusion. He's just asking his parents if they have any last questions for him or his advisor. It looks like he's done such a good job with the conference that they don't have any questions. Well, that's it. That is what a student-led conference looks like. Good luck to you as you prepare for yours. We hope yours goes as well as David's did.
So our goal is that we will have student-led conferences marking period. And there are a number of real benefits to that. And first and foremost, it brings parents into the school that you wouldn't normally see. The attendance at conferences is never what we expect or desire it to be. This is one great way to really develop academic dialogue with the parents, to make students take ownership of their learning, and really the halo effect, we call it, is develop goodwill among the stakeholders in the school. Fortunately or unfortunately, though, a good student-led conference is bolstered by an advisory program, and that's our last initiative of the original 7 when we started middle school redesign. And when you have that, you get comments like this. You know, this is the first time I spent so much time in school. My child's actually talking to me about what's going on in school, and it really prepares students to go into the new program of studies that we discussed at our last meeting. We really should have student success plans, which is part of advisory and student-led conferences, starting as low as 5th grade. We have the mechanism to do that, but in order to do that, we really need to have a solid student advisory program, which we're hoping to put in place next year at all of the middle schools. Okay, last slide, I promise.
I think we had a question.
I just want to add a comment. I like that. I like the music, I like the humor, the actors involved. I also like the eye contact and the leadership skills that these students will learn, sharing best practices with other students as well. But one question, who's picked? I mean, how many children are picked for this eventually when we have this set?
Everyone.
Okay, so all the students will
We're just
be...
doing it in
okay.
6th grade this year, but next year, 6th, 7th, and 8th.
All will be picked for
Yes,
this? Okay.
everyone, no escape.
Okay, and how do they, I mean, what's your feeling about how the students are feeling about that?
6th grade's gone pretty well. I'm going to defer to Mr. Vellucci and give us some feedback on 6th grade. It went surprisingly well. We did do a lot of coaching. We had a lot of excellent coaching from Suzanne Korshets and CSSR.
I'm sure
Teachers
that
are
they're
giving a lot
learning
of
from,
PD.
all the students are learning from each other and sharing best practices together.
So we have been working with our students in grade 6, and the school-led conferences will actually take place the first week in June. So right now we are scheduling meetings with the families and to come in, and we're doing that online, right, Ms. Robinson and Ms. Kelly?
Yeah, so we're using Sign Up Genius. It's been going on for a couple months now.
Yeah.
But we're using Sign Up Genius for that. We're having it take place in this library. We'll have 5 conferences going on at a time for 10 minutes. So our teachers will push in. We will have the adults there, so the teachers will push in and they will go from table to table just to monitor how the conference is going. Right now, since our training, after every big project or a test or a paper, the kids have been reflecting. So we've been utilizing Google Drive to keep their documents in there. And then Mrs. James emailed me last week about utilizing Google Sites to actually house their stuff for 3 years, so they can use the Google Sites to present their performance through grades 6, 7, and 8.
At some point, just for the board, I would love to see an actual video just to see the students in action because it kind of highlights everything that they've learned so far. I think it would be great to see that.
So our conferences are taking place June 5th and 6th.
Yeah, and Dr. Damasco, we did want to say that anyone that may be interested in coming in, welcome to do so.
That's great. And
Yeah,
some of us work
absolutely.
full, it's kind of hard to get
I know.
because I think if we had, I did the visual, I know for me, I'm a visual learner, just to see it, actually see it in place and see how the students are interacting, I think would be great.
Should we do a short clip at each school?
Yeah, I mean, just to share that, I think would be.
Your
phenomenal.
synopsis was very accurate, though, when you talk about leadership development and content.
And that's also life skills
It's
for
dead
these
on
students.
research.
It's
Yeah.
what will carry them through, by the time they get to college. will really help them.
Sorry, I'm just unclear. Who's at the table with the
Parents
student?
and the student.
And no teacher?
There may be a teacher at the beginning to guide and facilitate, or that student's advisor, or one of their teachers. That's why we're.
So essentially, they're coming to the school to have a
I
family
think
meeting.
your thought was that there might be 4 or 5 going out at the same time
Yes.
of the same teacher, and she would push in to each one part of the time, right?
Right, so what's going to end up happening is the teachers that I work with, the 2 other teachers, the ELA teacher and the math teacher, and myself, and if we, probably our other ELA teacher will push in during the conference time. So during that the 5 conferences that are happening, we will have teachers rotating just to make sure that they're on target with their script that we'll be going over.
And can you talk a little bit, I guess this partially goes to reflections on how it's gone for the 6th grade already. Think how what has been the level of engagement from families, and what happens in cases where families are not able to take that time or are deferred for whatever reason, apprehensive of coming into the school for something like a conference anyways, until oftentimes it takes some time to change that perception, and over time families will become more engaged when they realize it's a positive experience. But especially for families that have not necessarily had great past experiences in the educational system, something like this could be daunting. So could you talk a little bit about the family engagement and what happens in cases where a family does not want to come in?
That's a great point. So we talked about students in those situations, to give them the opportunities to ask other adults. We do have other family members that may be interested in coming. We do actually even have them choose whether or not they may want to have a teacher to sit and go through the process. So that every student will have another adult, if you will. It may not be 100% of the students having family, but there may be other adults who may take that role at that time.
We have other teachers who volunteered also.
Yeah.
You know, their free time to come in and step in for a child who doesn't have an adult.
Yeah.
I'll be the skeptic on this one. I'm willing to try anything, you know, if it works, it works. First a question, is this, will these conferences in any way be a substitute for a more traditional conference where certain things are, where parents have to be made aware of certain positive and perhaps certain negative things that are going on in the life of their children? Will they be a substitute for that?
No.
So those
will be
conferences.
in addition to.
But
But this is our goal. It's a
middle
way-
school.
So there's no conferences in our middle schools to deal with those issues?
Unless the kid's having problems.
Okay. All right, so as teachers, generally, you only do it as you need to do it. Have a conference with a family.
Correct.
Well, okay, so I think, again, I think this is a norming issue for us. Most middle schools do have conferences. K through 8 have conferences throughout the state. We have not. So this
We
is,
don't have
again, this is norming for
But
us.
this is not a conference because the
This-
teacher's not participating.
So I'm going to get back to, no, but you're right. So what we don't have is it's another jaw-dropping moment for me. So we don't have, you're saying in our middle schools, we do not have an organized way to get parents into the school at appropriate times.
It's a challenge.
And I remember I mentioned how we did it in New York. Not legal, but the report cards never went home until we saw them. Period, end of story.
That was elementary though, right?
Yeah, it was elementary, but still, these parents are parents. My point is though, I think the focus, well, give it a try, but the focus may be a little bit.
So Dr. Kimmel, I think what you're seeing here is the intersection of trying to have conferences with what the research tells us is best practice in terms of how the conferences should be held.
But in lieu of other types of conferences.
Right. I mean, I don't think there's a differentiation. I mean, among middle schools that have been having conferences for years, the shift nationally and in Connecticut is to student-led conferences. Now, we have the opportunity, because we haven't been doing that, to do that from the start. If it's not successful, if it doesn't work, we could revert to, teacher-led conferences like everybody else has been doing for years. Again, I think we want to try this. We want to see how it works. There is a considerable amount of research that suggests that this is one of the ways that a student is put in charge of their own learning. And rather than it simply being done to them, they're directing it, and so you have a greater sense of student efficacy by doing this. Now again, we have to work on doing it well, and we also have to get some feedback from our parents, and I think that will direct us in terms of what we do in the future.
My view, just to continue, my view is that students from a very early age on are in total control of what they learn and don't learn. And it's very important to maintain it's the obligation of teachers to figure out how to connect not only with their students from whatever 8 to 3 every day, but to establish relationships with parents, so the parents know what the student is supposed to be doing vis-a-vis a variety of things, from homework to social studies to science, you name it. That kind of connection has to be there. My feeling is, in itself, this is an interesting concept, and it probably has positive outcomes. But what I am learning, though, there may be something, again, another missing link in our school system that we have to figure out a way to address. If I was looking at the situation, I would probably try to have some kind of hybrid situation. Teacher needs an opportunity to discuss, hey, your kid is like 4 years ahead in math. Did you know that? Da, 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 da. Okay? And even though he's in trouble or she's in trouble every third day, da, 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 da. All of these things you need to have. And if it's a catch as catch can for the teachers, maybe not, especially middle school where it gets a little bit complicated. I just don't quite get it. We're adopting something it's new, it's different, it's okay, but I think we have a bigger issue that we need to address, and that has to do with a more traditional, I'm not saying traditional, a more traditional kind of conference, perhaps a hybrid of what you're talking about. It's very common for the kids to do most of the talking in a traditional format. You can kill two birds with one stone, but the teachers got to have a lot to say to those parents if the teacher is worth his or her salt. That's my point, and we're missing something.
Okay, Barbara and then Sarah.
Well, I think Sarah, I guess I have a two-parter. Do we have a contractual reason that we haven't been able to have middle school conferences? Is that an obstacle that we need to overcome, or is there no actual obstacle?
Well, it's been overcome. We have not traditionally had it. The middle schools traditionally have had the time off, but they've not had the conferences. And so, Frank, you're going to have to help me with this. And so, in order to have, and so they were supposed to have PD during that period of time. I think we all feel, including the leadership of the NFT who has complained about this from time to time, that PD was largely ineffective. It was supposed to be school organized. Some schools organized it well, others did not. And I think there's a meeting of the minds that this would be much more effective if it took the form of actual conferences. In order to do that requires an early dismissal, okay, which we will do.
We already have early dismissal. I mean, it seems like we have everything in place to do traditional. I think it's fine to skip the step to a student-led teacher conference, but I think the teacher should be there.
The teachers will
The
be
teachers are there, they can do multiple conferences at once.
Well, I think there's
I mean, part of
confidentiality
the-
issues when you've got multiple families and they're...
Part of the issue with our conferences now is that there is not enough time to bring every parent in and have an individual conference with the 2 early dismissal days. So if you're going to have a traditional conference and bring everybody in, we're going to have more early dismissals. I think this is a method where within 2 days of early dismissal, you can have every parent in, and that would be the
So
goal.
you have to
And there are, as was pointed out by our staff earlier, there are some parents who are not going to come in. So the idea is to have another adult or a member of the faculty who volunteers. Again, going back to the research, connection with two people means everything. So that every student can present their work. Right now, we lose some students in the process because we lose their parents.
Sarah is next.
I was going to say, parent, I think this is absolutely an improvement on nothing. Because and I don't mean that in a snarky way at all. I think that the potential for self-actualization that's inherent in the idea of a child leading a conference is great. I agree that teachers should absolutely be present, and I think that Barbara hit on an interesting point with the confidentiality issue. But my question, and I don't know if I missed this piece when I went to the bathroom, is there a rubric for the child? Is there a rubric?
Oh, yes. The teacher, they're scripted, they're trained.
And is the child is worked with through the process of developing their review?
This depends on the advisory.
Yeah, I want to note this slide here. Student-led conferences rest on a solid advisory program, which rests on a solid curriculum. They're part and parcel. They're not standalone. So when you have a good advisory program, you can do all of these things in an attempt to connect that student to the adults, connect that student to the school, and ultimately bring in parents. And this is where we get at social emotional skills as well and develop leadership among the students. So there are lots of benefits to student-led conferences, but they don't go alone. They go hand in hand with a solid advisory program.
So clarification question, how many students would each adult have in the school as their advisees?
I think we want like a homeroom type situation. Everybody would have a certain.
Okay, so would these only be the traditional instructional teachers, or would these be all of the adults in the school? So then you would have smaller numbers, correct?
Exactly. You want to use as many adults as possible.
Okay. I mean, my high school, I have this approach. So, because then I'm thinking if we have, and just to make it clear, I fully support the idea of student empowerment and ownership in their learning. Absolutely supportive of that. I love the idea of student-led conferences. I'm fully supportive of the idea of the advisory. I am concerned about this, some form of adult from the school not just there to support the student-led conference, but actually being there to fully support those students, sitting at the table, also knowing that some of our students are coming from families where this might be an uncomfortable conversation with their parents, and it may need more than one staff member floating amongst 4 or 5 tables to support that student and show that student that the faculty are there to support them as well. So
I think that was the concept of having another adult who is a member of the faculty with the school.
But so I guess my question then is, if the advisory model means then that we have smaller groups, it could be 10 students, 15 students, would that then allow a more hybrid version, which would be a student-led conference with the family members if they are then available, but that advisor would also be there, fully there for that student's individual conference?
In some cases where the advisor might be a specialist, yes. In the case of the core teachers, no, because they're going to be the ones that are actually running and pushing into the conferences.
But they shouldn't need to then if all of the staff are advisors and are trained. There wouldn't be as much of a need for push-in.
Yeah, but the student is reporting on what they're doing in their core classes.
But should an advisor not have some idea of how a student's doing in general?
They should if they're meeting regularly.
Again, we can look at that, but you know, you can't be in one place with the student if you're conducting and pushing into 5 conferences that are going on at the same time.
Understood.
Sarah.
A question that your question made me think of would be, who would be determining, say for example, you have a personality conflict, right? Like who's determining personality conflict? Who's determining children?
I think we would leave this to our staff, particularly our house leaders, as they organize this.
Yeah. I'm just wondering if there's a mechanism or to be thought of, a mechanism for requesting extra help with this for children who might need it.
Anybody want to take a try at that?
It could be thought of.
Yeah, we really had a hard time hearing, so if you could
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just saying, I'm thinking if there is a mechanism being developed to identify children who might need extra help with this model and who that would fall to.
Yeah, and actually, you know, as we are setting these up, I mean, we know our students extremely well because we work with them every day. So we certainly know what their needs might be. And as we are getting ready to set up the conferences, we are really planning on those. As a matter of fact, we are meeting tomorrow morning for Roton, 7 o'clock tomorrow morning to talk about some of their conferences as we are making progress. And we are talking with individual kids and what their needs might be as we get close to that student-led conference, so that every student will be supported by teachers and certainly by any other adult if the family cannot be present.
That's the reason I use the word negative.
Yeah.
I'm worried about you guys.
Yeah.
You know, it seems to have a handle on it.
Yeah, that's definitely a duty that is in the job description for us.
Yeah, but this is a supervisory issue as well. So Craig, I think we're running out of time. I'd like you to conclude on page 49.
Yep,
okay?
this is the last slide, I promise. And because we're a year ahead of schedule, we were in the phase in 6th grade, 7th, and then 8th, and now that 6th, 7th, and 8th are already on the block, it gives us the opportunity to fine tune the last few issues that we would like to address as part of middle school redesign. I'll go through these quickly, but please feel free to ask questions. Grade 6 orientation, some schools have it, some schools don't. We'd like to come to a standardization on that, so our 5th graders will be prepared.
Orientation for the kids.
The incoming 6th grade. Summer learning, obviously we like to extend summer learning not only to mathematics, but also up into the middle school, currently K-5 ELA. Guidance and scheduling, we'd like to see a more robust Connecticut comprehensive guidance curriculum done. We've actually removed these scheduling duties from the guidance counselors. We have 13 individuals across the 4 middle schools who are being trained by Adam Reynolds on how to properly do scheduling. So this will take that burden off the guidance counselors so they can engage more in guidance counseling. Band and instrument lessons Dr. Adamowski addressed, and we'll be addressing soon. We would like to see more consistency in special subjects. In other words, right now, not every middle school has the exact same electives. We'd like to see a little more standardization across the four schools.
I just want to spend a second on that more with the board. So we have the specials that we have in each middle school are historically based, they're legacy based, they're essentially based on people that have been employed in those roles. They may not be the best specials to offer. They may not have the highest CTE value. And I think we have to look next year. This is, we're going to be conducting the guidance study similar to what we did with AT this year. But I think we have to look at what does the research tell us are the best opportunities for special subjects for middle school, and which contribute the most to the standards overall, which have the highest CTE value, which which conform to the developmental characteristics of the trans-adolescent, and I think that's going to require some careful study, because right now we're doing things simply because we've done them in the past in this area.
Gifted and talented, we've addressed in a different form. Encore classes, we would like to see more rigor and choice. We're actually piloting a few encores with the city this year with the police and fire departments. One right here actually at Roton with the fire department, so we're pretty excited about that. And then we will talk again about math sequencing, whether students going to go algebra, geometry, algebra 2, or algebra 2, and then geometry. So these are some of the things that usually are far off on the distance, but because we've accelerated the timeline, we get to fine tune and make even more progress.
Okay, questions?
Sure.
I'm just going to say, this has been great. The focus has really been on our students that are struggling the most and needing the most help and how we've brought them up. What we haven't talked at all, which I know is kind of interconnected with academically talented, but even our more middle of the road or our higher, our higher performing students. And if there's been a dedicated academically talented program in middle school with each quarter a different subject. And, if you look at the schedule that you've put out, there's there's no obvious place where that will fit in. I know Roton's kind of run an experiment, but I do think, you know, we do need to address what about those higher performing students? We're doing all this work for them, which we should, obviously, in the lower performing students, but there's now another group of students that we haven't even discussed.
Yeah, that was going to be my question too, is you said as we covered gifted program delivery in the middle school, but I don't feel that we have heard what that's going to be, so.
Well, so what we have been doing is pulling students out of English language arts classes. Okay, so we can establish that that's the status quo. The key to what would be done differently in the future is inherent in the recommendations that your study committee made to you in workshop session a month ago that have now been referred to the curriculum committee. And the premise of that is an attempt to address the progress, the academic achievement of students who are in the gifted program. So you're all aware that despite the expense of over $1.2 million per year, our gifted students have not progressed. Their achievement has not increased. And the concept of you know, raising up a school system, raising the bar, is that the top improves as well as the bottom, and the middle improves as well as the top and the bottom. All students are growing. The theory is that that has not been possible in our current pull-out approach, because you don't stop being gifted after you're pulled out for 2 45-minute periods. You're gifted all the rest of the time, and your needs are not being addressed. Hence, the concept of the cluster groupings, right? And so I think the key to this, when you say, okay, well, what's the specifics of what's going to be done differently? The committee has recommended that to you, right? And that's going to be determined by what is finally comes out of the curriculum committee and is adopted by the board.
Yes.
Yeah, we will discuss on the 17th, there will be a discussion, a joint meeting of the curriculum committee and the special ed task force on exactly how this will play out in the middle school and in an elementary school beginning next year and years ahead. If necessary, we'll have another discussion of it, focusing on the middle school, which is a little more complicated. It's an interesting issue. On the one hand, as Dr. Adamowski and others have pointed out, our scores for our students in the gifted and talented pull-out programs are not nearly as high as we would expect. However, if you put that in the context of the discussion we've had and what we're discussing about rigor and things like that at the tier 1 level, it's hard to figure. You could probably make a case those scores might be lower without the pull-out. We don't know. We just don't know. And that would take a kind of analysis that wouldn't be worth the money. But we will continue to discuss that. And as I said before, if we can have those kids receiving a rigorous challenge and instruction together in a classroom 5 days a week, all day, plus the special, whatever it is, pull out, that's a whole lot better than a couple periods a week. So you have it both ways. 1 or 2 periods a week.
But I think
won't really.
Bruce, we're talking about 2 different things, because that pull-out model is what's happening in elementary school. In the middle school, you're having AT every day.
But I agree, and I think Roton has come up with some interesting ways to deal with that problem, and it makes sense.
Yeah, so
that's what we'll continue to
So
discuss.
to Mr. Barbas's point, it's also possible to schedule this. In other words, put it into the schedule if the student is not taking as many specials, right? Or you alternate it with a particular special back and forth. But that means that you will diminish what they take in terms of the other specials, which, you know, is also part of this issue of consistency in special subjects, right? We pretty much, I think, have to approach those 2 issues together, but that certainly is possible and may be desirable. You know, we're in general, we don't like the issue of pullouts. We'd like to anticipate a day in our school system where Tier 1 instruction is robust and differentiated, and you actually lose something when you're being pulled out, right? We happen to have this phenomenon now at several schools, certain schools, where both parents and students are saying, I want to be pulled out because I'm bored in the regular classroom and it's not meeting my needs, and I live for the pullout. Well, that shouldn't be the case, and the root cause of that is the quality of Tier 1 instruction and differentiation in the regular classroom. So again, this may be an issue where we have an interim approach and then it evolves into something further, but I think we're confident that the discussions at the curriculum committee are very sophisticated at this point around how best to do this given our circumstances.
I'll just add a comment. I mean, as a board member, having 3 kids that have gone through academically talented, elementary school and then mostly through their middle school years, we never want to lose sight of the social, emotional, and the academic component, and how critically important it is for kids at that level just to feel that they can coexist with their peers and have that type of conversation going. So I think whatever we decide to do, when we're talking about it, we're discussing it as a committee, it's just so critically important for those kids to have that type of program and have that kind of academics. And it just keeps them going, and it makes
You mean
them
to have a
successful.
class with their
Yes,
like peers?
Exactly.
And I would suggest that testing doesn't show the kind of growth that a true academically talented gifted program is working on. As much as you hope it does, it's not the goal of that.
And it's also not just...
Well, I would beg to differ. It is the goal.
Testing is never the goal.
That is the goal exactly, to take a student at a certain level and to bring them higher as a result of being in a gifted program and working with a gifted teacher.
And it's also not just the academics as well, it's really the social component as well. So I think all of that together.
Now, you charge us with raising student achievement, right? Those are my goals. Those are the goals of our administrators. You can't hold us accountable for that if you're not going to have all of our programs designed around this is the essence of raising the bar.
Just one final point, on a personal level, I think we spend a lot of time talking about band, music, and this and that, and gifted programs, and I think back as a teacher and as a parent, and I too had a kid who spent a whole lot of time in academically and artistically talented, but going back, try and remember the early 90s to mid-90s, I could tell you in Cranberry all of the strengths and weaknesses of his first grade, he came in first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade teachers. Everything about them. I don't remember what he did. And I was very pleased with the education he received at Cranberry. It was great. Every one of those teachers were different, and it was fairly rigorous. I don't remember what happened in his academically talented courses, nor did I really care. The only thing that really counts is what's going on in the classroom, all day, every day, 5 days a week. And if we've reached the point where we're grabbing at straws, we're just never going to progress as a district. A couple of periods a week doesn't cut it for anyone, and we'll look at the same kind of scores that we had. It's just not going to work. Those kids need to be challenged, really challenged. And that's hard. As a teacher, I'm telling you, it's hard. It's the bottom you can get up. And the way test scores have worked for many, many years before they had growth models, you focused on the bottom and you got them to the middle. And folks languished. But that's changed now. That's totally changed. So we've got to change also, and we've got to find a way to have that rigor, have all of that challenging stuff going on, like I say, all day, every day in school, where the kids really come home and do all kinds of projects and everything, technology, you name it. Something to be proud of that's going on in the classroom.
Okay, well, unless, I think, we're going to be talking more about this on the 17th, so it's not over, but if you have something else, Julie.
Thanks, Mr. Berman. I think reflecting on this as well as conversations that we've had about middle school redesign, as well as the conversations that we've had about the proposed academically talented changes, as well as some of the summer school learning pieces. I think, to echo Mr. Kimmel's comments, I think it is going to get harder and harder to see the drastic gains because we are starting to improve as a whole. Of course, it gets harder to go from 90 to 91 as it does from 40 to 70. I think it's phenomenal that we're starting to see that the interventions are really taking hold and are really working, and that is absolutely the right direction. The right steps have been taken to do that. I think as we acknowledge that it's going to get harder and harder to improve, what I'm continuing to rest on now is that we absolutely have to focus on Tier 1 instruction, and that requires strong job-embedded PD, not one-off PDs that are not clearly monitored and followed through on, but real job-embedded ongoing PD in every single classroom, in every single school. The PD becomes the norm of every single day for all staff, and that includes your classroom teachers as well as administrators. And the other piece is if we're trying to get from differentiation as the first step to personalization as the ideal, we absolutely need the PD that goes along with that, as well as thinking about interdisciplinary learning. And I'm fully supportive of additional double blocks if needed of ELA or math to get that baseline up, but interdisciplinary learning is so much more exciting for students. It's so much more exciting for teachers as well. But I would really like to see the conversation shift moving forward to more conversations about interdisciplinary learning, what true differentiation looks like, what real personalization looks like, and how we continue to really elevate the level of Tier 1 instruction.
I think that was very well said, and I want to say for the record that we talk about the focus on Tier 1 constantly behind the scenes, so that's the next frontier. I also want to make a comment about the schedule. Everything you've discussed in the last 5 minutes is possible in the flexible block schedule model for the middle schools, and Mr. Vellucci and the Roton team have proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that there's even more opportunity and possibility to work with that schedule. We're so happy with the schedule. You have maximized what can be done with it, so kudos to you. Thank you again.
Just to follow up a little bit on Ms. Corbett's statement, the PD that you just described is essentially the coaching model, right? So job-embedded PD in its essence is a coaching model. We scratched the surface of this year by hiring 2 coaches, one in math, one in reading, from CES, to assist our middle school teachers with the new reading and math curriculum. We've had mixed results with it. In some cases, it was very successful. In other cases, we had a principal that did not enable or support the coaches to work with the teachers when they needed to. But this is what we need to do more of. And again, you're either going to have to bring in new staff, or we're going to have to provide this kind of support for existing staff. But Tier 1 instruction is the hardest area to move and to improve. And you know, we have to look at structurally. We have to look at things like station rotation models, you know, which we use very successfully in summer school now, and you know, adaptive technology as well would be another part of this. So yes, this is our challenge in the future. This is a challenge that many suburban districts are very good at, or become good at, just as urban districts have become good at raising the bottom, right? And we're now in that difficult transition point between where we are not just happy at the current time by you know, raising the bottom and being the best urban. We're trying to compete with our suburban neighbors as well as our city grows, and that's important to maintain our diversity. And it's also important to be able to attract and retain families. So this is I think, a great discussion you've just had, and it defines in many cases the board's direction, or the direction that you have to set in the future, and what you have to fund, and what you have to support, because we are at that transition from having to have every student in the school system growing in order to maintain the diversity in which parents in a thank you.
We're not a fidgety group.
Those students get the same kinds of gains as students who require intervention.
Okay, well, thank you for all your time and effort in this lengthy presentation. And I think we will wrap up the workshop, and we will have public comments if people want to have public comments.
Do we have a sign-up list,
I
Mr. Chairman?
never saw a sign-up
It was
list.
there, but there's nobody on it. Oh, we did? Oh, apparently Ms. Megan Hopkins.
Okay, so Megan Hopkins, do you want to start?
Yeah, we're about to get it.
Okay. You can come up to the microphone, Megan, or you can just project.
Anyone else?
I'm Megan Hopkins. Yep. One of Palliser Avenue. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be here tonight. A lot of it's just because we did have to bring some refreshments, but it's been fascinating. And sitting here tonight, I wanted to be sure to bring up a couple of points, as I'm just finishing 6th grade for the first time in Norwalk. So my daughter is finishing 6th grade. I also have a 4th grader at Columbus. So we're kind of in this space of straddling what's happening at Columbus, becoming a K-8 school. We chose not to keep our daughter there because we thought Roton would be a better fit for her and her needs. But I'm still in that decision point about my son. So as I look at the things that were discussed tonight, I wanted to plant a few seeds about things that I think are amazing and things that I think are concerning a little bit. So my daughter is a high-achieving AT for sport girl who's done very well in school all along and has done very well here at Roton. But about in December, I realized that she's horribly disorganized. She went from having one tiny little world at Columbus where she had one teacher telling her what to do every day, to literally having 10 different teachers here at Roton. And she had to learn how, I found out she didn't learn how to manage all of that and to be prepared for that. Now, Roton offers an amazing summer program that we didn't get to partake in because of our summer plans, but I think a lot of kids do benefit for that. But I really encourage you all to think about middle school redesign with 5th graders and 4th graders and 3rd graders, because my kids, I'm not a big homework fan, but I believe there should be a ramp as kids get prepared for middle school. And my kids were not, my 6th graders definitely was not prepared with getting ready for the rigor of middle school. And my 4th grader is going to be in shock. He is not the AT track and would much rather play baseball after school. So we are, in that decision-making point, and I think about all that he could do here, and I'm really excited about that, but I'm also terrified about that at the same time. So then a couple points that came along related to AT. AT has been a fantastic experience for my daughter. I know it needs to evolve and change. I think what Roton has done with the AT block in ELA is fantastic. We started out the year and she would leave AT and walk into an ELA class that was already happening. So I can't imagine being that teacher or the kids on either end of that spectrum. Bringing Mr. Golden in, who's the ELA teacher for the AT kids, has been fantastic. He's dedicated to them. The writing skills my daughter is getting right now are phenomenal. I'm really, really excited. So what you've done there I think is really great, and I think that is a model that can work at other schools. And then the conference piece. That is definitely a shock for the system with parents leaving elementary school where you're so involved in everything. You have conferences twice a year and you know everything, to middle school where you don't know anything. And I think I'm one of those pain in the neck teachers who, connects with parents, who connects with all the teachers and bothers them when I need to. So I've got the connection I need with my kids' teachers, but I know a lot of parents don't have that comfort level or that time for various reasons. I think Roton's done some really good things to get parents connected with teachers. We have an open house, we have copies that are by department, which I think are really great. I'm over my time. But I just think those are some of the things to think about is middle school redesign's been fantastic, but it's got to extend beyond just middle school. Thank you.
Thanks, Megan. Jody Sattler. Please state your name and address for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
My name is Jody Sattler. I live at 17 Holland Avenue. I have an 8th grader, a 7th grader, and a 5th grader. So I have lived middle school redesign when everyone was, block scheduling. I'm like, no, my 6th grader did it. Got it. You're going to be fine. What I have found, though, is with the block scheduling and with the changes in AT, I do have concerns that we're not going to still have the AT time during the day. I've been on the redesign committee. The one thing that all the kids said was they need their time every day in AT. And to echo the change, what they did here at Roton, where we took the language arts block, my son was the same way, and my daughter too. They were confused about assignments. They were having a hard time keeping up with what was going on when AT this year became a technical pull-out, right? And they were actually truly being pulled out. In January, Mr. Bellucci did a very smart thing, switched it. The language arts block became half language arts, all AT kids together, and half they go to their AT class and then they switch. It was like overnight for my children. It was a huge change. They were finally able to keep up on what their assignments were, what they needed to do, and they both have Miss Stroily, and she's able to just really move along very quickly with these children. They're much happier being in her class. I keep seeing the schedules, and I know we keep talking a lot about, are we going to have 3rd graders in AT, and what's going to happen in elementary schools, but we're advocating AT kids all the way up to 8th grade. We really need to have the most staffing and focus on the middle school kids getting ready to go to our wonderful honors classes in high school and the great program IB and everything else that we've got in high school. So we really need to make sure these kids are prepared. The highest level kids need a chance to be in these AT classes every day. They need a block of time, even if we do it the way that Mr. Bellucci set up. But it's such a key component to get them ready for high school. And again, every year you add kids, so you have the most amount of kids in AT in the middle school, which is where the most amount of money should be spent then. That would make the most sense. I don't want any of the kids that are currently in the program to lose out next year. And I know too much. I know all about the SEM model. I believe in all that. I believe in all the enrichment, but I can't see these kids losing their special AT time. And as I go on, I'm so amazed at Mr. Livingston, what he created years ago. For those of you that know, he's a legend, right? What he did was really amazing. And the lastingness of what he kind of, he'll even admit, threw together has been great. I mean, it's really made a great impact on the kids. And we need to continue something like that moving forward for them, where they do critical thinking, they do deep dives, invention convention, any of those types of project-based work that they can do together with kids that are like them. And I just want to make sure that that point is made. And totally different on the special study. Thank you for doing that, because I really think that that is key. Again, I believe in the enrichment, and I believe that they need to be able to have a choice on what they're interested in, even more than Encore. And I do think there needs to be some consistency in terms of either rubric or curriculum for our specialists. So, made it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jody. Slightly over, but time served from the committee, and appreciate your feedback there. Joe Janderko.
Joe Janderko, 9 Mott Avenue. First, I'd like to begin with a thank you for the acknowledgement of Teacher Appreciation Week, and also for Dr. Armosky participating in the NEF event last week. Middle school redesign has created some positives in our staff and with Norwalk, especially here at Roton, which is considerably smaller, which has allowed for greater flexibility in their scheduling. Expanded block scheduling, interventions, new curriculum plans, and resources for math, social studies, music, world language, and ELA, and the ability to cover new curricula in a more in-depth manner have all aided our students in achieving great scores on the NWE tests, and hopefully on the soon-to-be completed SBAC testing. These great results have come with great cost to our students and our professional staff. We have required teachers to teach multiple subjects, devalued science and social studies, reduced related arts to our students, and established a rigid house structure. The policy of vertical houses was supposed to lead to smaller school communities and great flexibility in meeting times. Instead, it has led to larger communities with increased isolation of sixth graders at a critical time at the beginning of their school year. We believe that the fifth to sixth grade transition is important, and yet we find that sixth graders are even less supported this year compared to previous years. Another goal was the flexibility of vertical houses, but we find less flexibility because of subject area and grade levels are only now able to meet after school compared to under the former team structure. Coordination of assemblies, field trips, and individual student support strategies is even now more complex. Middle school redesign has very big, broad ideas, but few details have been worked out. We are grateful for the hard work and dedication of all our certified and non-certified staff, our house leaders and building administrators at each building who have worked to reshape and reconfigure these big ideas to prevent significant lapses in student learning. We are still concerned and struggle with many things, such as students repeating courses designed to be taken only for one semester. Some sections are overloaded while other sections are underpopulated. Dedicated teachers and staff are often left with the task of cleaning up and fixing the middle school redesign committee's decrees. NFT would simply like to make the following two requests. Return to the truly small learning communities. We call them teams. Revise the schedule and house structure to reduce class size, strengthen student-teacher engagement, and allow for social and emotional connections to develop. Class sizes of 27, 28, and/or caseloads of up to 130 students should be avoided and eliminated. A renewed conversation. The second request is a renewed conversation with teachers and NFT leadership about middle school redesign. The reestablishment of the middle school curriculum, which was held and met with success with Dr. Connor while he was here. Finally, I would just like to point out that we want our middle schools to be successful, and we also want our teachers to have a sustainable level of stress and work. Teachers work very hard every day to complete and do and fill the holes that some of this program has created. The past 2 years have been grueling, and the next few years will not be much easier. AT redesign, next-gen science standards, in the wings. But please think and reflect on all of these recommendations as you do this. We are here, Mary and I are here all the time, asking, begging, pleading to be included in some of these decisions. And I feel that at this point, allowing some of these decisions to go through without our input does a disservice to the staff, but more importantly, does a disservice to our students. Thank you.
Mary Jordan's last on tonight's list of speakers.
Thanks very much. Mary Jordan, 9 Mott Avenue. I'll be very brief. There was some questions about student conferences in middle school. We have time dedicated for parent conferences in the schedules of most buildings. Teachers can request them, students can request them, parents can request them. It's generally for specific concerns. We have teachers who have caseloads of 180 and 190. A parent conference night, 2 parent conference nights is not going to be allowed for individual parent conferences. Some teachers have 75 students, which is less, but an elementary teacher has 24 and 26, so they can actually meet with parents more suitably. In exchange, however, middle school teachers, middle school buildings host pancake breakfasts, ice cream socials, parent orientation nights, 5th to 6th transition open house night. We do our best to meet with big crowds of parents, small sections. We have the open house nights where we try to meet with as many individual classrooms full of parents as possible. So we do have a great effort that is being placed to reach out and meet with parents on many different levels, in many groupings, and many occasions. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Mary.
Mr. Chairman, is that the last?
And that concludes public speaking. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
If the board has time for one other comment, since this has come up a number of times tonight, I wanted to ask Mr. Vellucci if he could just spend a second with you explaining what he's actually done in terms of the scheduling of the AT program. Joe, would you mind coming up and just giving a 2-minute overview of that so the board can understand it and have it in mind as it continues its discussions on the AT redesign?
So we, at the beginning of the school year, had our academically talented students. As you know, we have a block in language arts. So our academically talented students were leaving the language arts block to go to academically talented. And what happened is because we have limited sections of AT, we could not have the AT students all lead language arts at the same time, because then the AP class will be twice as many students, which will be over contractual numbers. So what we actually did, we regrouped, and we were able to, within our block schedule time, to be flexible enough to reschedule students where the academically talented students at every grade level will have the same teacher. So if I was an AT, if I were an AT student in grade 6, I will have the same ELA teacher, and I will have ELA at the same time. And we as AT students will then go to AT at the same time. So there was no loss of learning. We could then move at a much, at a more rigorous pace in ELA, because now we all have the AT students in one place at one time. So what that has created is a more rigorous program for our AT students at each grade level. So you do not have some AT kids going to ELA and some leaving ELA. So there is a real issue when it comes to consistency there. So we were able within our schedule to do that. So our AT kids are in English language arts together at each grade level, and they go to AT as the class at the same time. But we have seen that the rigor level has gone extremely, up.
For that class?
Excuse me?
For that class, are you experiencing any kind of brain drain in the, how is it affecting the rest of the?
Well, and they are certainly mainstreamed, heterogeneously grouped in every other class. So when it comes to social studies, when it comes to science, they are then again mixed with other students. So the only class that they are not is English language arts. But they still get English language arts one half a block. So as an AT student, I go to ELA half a block and AT half a block with academically talented students. And these are also students that are again mixed for encore once a week. They are heterogeneously grouped with the encore with other kids and other activities that we have going when it comes to specials. But there is one class a day which they are homogeneously grouped. That's the ELA and AT.
But Joe, how does that work with the vertical houses? Does that mean all these kids are in the same house? That can't be possible.
No, it works. It works.
We do it with accelerated math at West Roxton the same way.
Yeah. So I have one, let's say, ELA teacher at each grade level that will have a dedicated ELA AT class. And because, at Roton, we are a little bit different because we try to make everything work with fewer dollars, if you will, because, we have fewer students. And the teachers do a little bit of everything to make it work. And I am extremely fortunate to have wonderful teachers who are willing to work and make it work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, well then I guess that wraps up public comments. And
I'd like to make a motion to move into executive session.
thank you, Mr. Meek, Ms. Myra Mitchell, seconds. All in favor? Okay, we'll take a quick 2-minute break, and then we'll go into executive session. Thank you, everyone, for your attendance.